What's up? I hope you guys are all doing well today. Welcome back to another Awaken video. So with the game now in global launch, I want to do a quick video going over the different Synthesis Legendary champions so that a newer player will have an idea of which one is used where, kind of what they do. We'll go over their kit a little bit so that each person can decide which one would be best for them and which one they would like to build. So here we have the Synthesis page here. So the three heroes in the Legendary right now are Saris, Savannah, and Tia, which are fire, forest, and water. And we'll hop over into the index and start looking over their kits and talking about them a little bit. So we'll start here with Saris in the Sylvain Woodlands. Alright, as you can see, she's very fast with an S rating in speed, an A rating in crit rate, and an A in attack, B in health, C in defense, so she's definitely a damage dealer. Her trait is, every 2 turns, this character's abilities attack 1 extra target at the end of the turn. A1 is, it deals 100% damage to an enemy, grants defense pierce up to this character for 1 turn. Her special, or 2, is it deals 150% damage to an enemy for every enemy hit with this ability, grants 1 stack of ability immunity, which negates the next attack or ability used against her. And her ultimate is it grants attack up for 2 turns and then deals 200% damage to an enemy. So as you can see so far, she's a very high single target damage dealer, and her kit works very well together, giving her the defense pierce up once you use the A1, and then you've got the large hit that gives immunity, and then you've also got her ult, which is a really big hit that also gives attack up before attacking, so you can rack up a lot of extra damage, especially if you use her 1 and then go straight for the ult, because you'll get the defense pierce ability, and then you'll get the attack up by 30%, and then do the attack. So she can do a lot of damage to a single target, which is definitely really strong in a lot of the dungeons, which is what I would say is probably her main place of use. And I'll show you which ones that would be in here, in your dungeons. Oh, or we'll just get all of our daily reset stuff while doing this. Alright, here we go. So you've got the ability dungeons here. She would be really good in Bane Wraith because of the fire beating forest affinity. So that would make her really strong. She would be perfectly fine in the Flame Lizard because she would be neutral affinity, so you wouldn't gain anything extra fighting it, but you wouldn't be at a disadvantage in any way. The Wrathful Flood, she would probably be a little bit weaker against just because water is the strong affinity against fire, so she would be at a disadvantage here. If she was the only one you had, you might still be able to use her just with raw damage, but know that you would be at quite a disadvantage against that affinity. And then she would be very good in both the Lord of Holy Light and Shadow Captive, the light and dark affinity dungeons, because she would be neutral against both of those. So she'd be really good here. And then the Arcane Dominator, she would be really good in the Roaring Tulpa. One of my clanmates I talk to a lot uses her, and she does a really good job here, which is a really important gear dungeon, especially early on. And then she would be perfectly fine in the Ash Magisteria one. The only issue here is that you have to be able to clean up the little minions that he spawns so that he doesn't one-shot your whole team or at least do massive damage. So she'd be a good damage dealer on the boss himself. You would definitely want to bring some AoE damage to be able to take out a lot of the minions though. And then sadly, much like the previous blue dungeon, she'd be a little on the weak side here because of hitting weak affinity, and this is a particularly tough dungeon depending on your team comp, so she wouldn't really be much use here. And then again, she'd be perfectly fine in the light and dark affinity dungeons. She's also pretty good in stages like bounty hunts, different void tower levels, just because she can hit really hard. You could use her in a campaign farming team as well, or adventure mode, sorry. She probably wouldn't clear campaign stages as quickly as an AoE nuker, but she does do really, really high damage, so she can still be perfectly viable to bring in and on a team to clear campaign waves. And that is it for Saris. And the next one in the Dragon Scale Marsh is Savannah. This is the one I chose to do first myself, and she is an S attack rating, B from health to speed, and then an A in crit rate. Her passive is upon death grants 50 or ascended 100% of this character's attack to a random ally. So when she dies in a battle, her little spirit charm will go over to another random character, and that character will get a bonus of attack equal to 50% of whatever she's at, or obviously 100% if she's ascended. At first I wasn't really excited about this passive. It didn't seem particularly useful because, generally you don't want your champions to die. But in a few areas of the game, like the Armored Incursion clan boss fight, It's actually really useful because being a damage dealer, she tends to be a little squishier, and when she does finally get dropped, that attack boost goes to someone else and helps with a little bit of damage output. So it's not the most thrilling passive in the world, but it is pretty useful, and I've had it come in handy and get me some extra damage in the armored incursion fight, so I don't mind it after using it for a while. And then the rest of her kit is a little odd. A lot of people don't care for it much, but I've actually really grown to like this kit. But her A1 deals 100% damage to an enemy, reduces all this character's ability cooldowns by 1. Her 2 deals 200% damage to an enemy and reduces all this character's cooldowns by 2. On a critical strike, grants crit damage up 2, which is a 50% crit damage buff, for 1 turn. At the start of battle, this ability's cooldown is at its max duration, which I'll explain at the end here in a moment. And then her ultimate deals 300% damage to an enemy and grants revenge, which is stackable at the start of the battle. This ability's cooldown is at its max duration, so it hits really hard. It gives her a stack up to 3 times, which significantly increases her attack. So each time you use her ult, she'll get another stack of this, which is unremovable, as it says here, and it greatly increases her attack stat, and you can end up hitting really, really hard. I want to say mine, which isn't maximized for gear, but she's been hitting, I want to say, around 13,000 damage with her ult when I get some stacks up and I get the bonus from here. But the thing that's weird about her kit is, as it says in the abilities, the 2 and the ult both start at max cooldown, so they're not up. You can't use them right out of the gate. You have to wait for turns and use the A1 in order to bring the cooldowns down and be able to use them, which does somewhat limit where she can be used, but she does so much damage that even with it being a little bit of a slow kit, I still end up getting a lot of use out of her, and she puts out a lot of damage, especially in some dungeons, which is where I've been using her the most. So the way you want to use her kit generally is, obviously these are both on cooldown when you first start, so you'd start with the A1, do your battle as you would normally, and then when her A2 is up, you would want to hit someone or a minion or whatever it is, and you want high crit rate. Then you get the crit damage up 2, which gives her a stack for 50% crit damage, so you'd use that on an enemy, and then, usually in a dungeon when you got a boss, you would then come through while you have that buff right after because of the cooldowns, and then you would use the ult, and not only would you get a 300% damage hit, you would also be using the 50% crit damage up, and then that would give you the revenge stack. So then going further into fight, she racks up even more and more damage. So I'll go ahead and show you the different areas I've used her very heavily. So the biggest place I've had a lot of luck with her is in the guild dungeon, the armored incursion boss fight. It's a really good place to get a lot of resources. It's a lot of fun. I really like this in the game. This is one of my favorite places. I love building teams for it. But she's really, really good here. Obviously, right now, it's a fire affinity, so I wouldn't be using her because she would hit weak against it. But for both the blue and the green armored incursions, which it rotates through randomly, I believe, but weekly, she's really, really good here because the fight goes long enough that the kit starting off cooldown doesn't really matter because you're going to be rotating through all of your abilities anyways, and she racks up so much damage here. In those other 2 colored dungeons, she has been probably my highest damage dealer for quite a while now, even with semi-subpar gear. So I think she's really good in these. She's also very good in the Bane Wraith and Wrathful Flood ability dungeons. Neutral affinity here in the Bane Wraith because she's forest as well, and then strong affinity against water in the Wrathful Flood, so she makes farming these a lot easier because she hits the boss for so much damage. She's definitely not very strong in the Flame Lizard simply because of the negative affinity, but that's not too big a deal. 2 out of 3 being really strong is good, and then being neutral affinity, she is really good in both of these because much like Saris, she hits so hard that you can just use her in either of these as well. So 4 out of 5 dungeons being really strong is not bad at all. And then we've got the last one, which I don't have this one either, but I have seen her in use, and the guildmate of mine also has this one. Alright, so her trait applies Frostbite to an enemy for 2 turns. At the end of the enemy's turn, at 5 stacks, applied Frozen for 1 turn. So it sounds really weird, it's worded very poorly, but basically she builds up stacks of Frostbite on an enemy, which slows their speed, and when they hit 5 stacks, they should be frozen, which negates their next turn. And frozen also, they're unable to act and takes 50% more damage from all sources. Attacks on the target have a 50% chance to remove this effect. So when they're frozen, you attack them, you get 50% more damage. and attacking them has a 50% chance of removing the frozen. So you get more damage regardless, and hitting them has a 50-50 chance of taking the debuff off and they still get their turn, or staying on and making them entirely lose their turn. So it's not a complete lockout from their next turn, but it adds damage and it gives you a chance of having them stay frozen until their next turn, because they would lose the current turn if it were to stay up on them. So frozen's pretty useful. And then we've got the A1, deals 100% damage to an enemy and applies Frostbite. So starts building into the Frostbite stacks. The A2 deals 150% damage to an enemy and applies 2 stacks of Frostbite. So AoE hits for Frostbite. And then the ult deals 120% damage to all enemies with a 50% chance to outright apply Frozen for 1 turn. Chances increase to 80 if the enemy is affected by Frostbite. So the way you would generally use her is either use your A1 or start with the A2, hit everybody, try to apply the Frostbite, and then the next turn you would come through and use the ult, because then you would have a much higher chance of applying the Frozen due to being frostbitten beforehand. And her damage multipliers are okay. 100% on the A1 is okay. 150 on the A2 isn't bad at all. And then 120 is a little low for a damage dealer on the ult, but I would say her main use is going to be in things like crowd control for arena, trying to freeze the whole team so that you get more damage and they may or may not lose turns so that you can keep going. She'd be decent in the Flame Lizard because of the strong affinity, water beats fire. She'd be perfectly fine in the Wrathful Flood, neutral affinity, little weak in the Bane Wraith, negative affinity. And then again, perfectly fine in the Light and Dark because neutral. And then in the Arcane Dominator, I don't think she specializes here in dungeons like the last two do, but I definitely think she can be perfectly good because a lot of these guys have extra minions and minion waves building up to the boss, and keeping them frozen and not taking turns can be a big help. I definitely think that possibly Queen of Tides and then Ash Magisteria would be the specialties, probably more leaning towards Ash because strong affinity, and he has a lot of little side minions you have to try and keep killed, and being able to freeze and do extra damage to all of them would be useful. Perfectly good over here, but I definitely think her main use is going to be an arena champ, because being able to go first and try and freeze or get damage in and freeze the enemy team and locking them out from the next turn can be really helpful. So I definitely think she's more of an arena champ than anywhere else, mainly because she doesn't have the super high damage multipliers the other two do. So looking over the Hero Synthesis champions, you've definitely got some good selections here, and we won't talk about them today, but all of the epics are pretty decent characters, a few stronger than others, but most of these are pretty good too. But it'll take you a while to get to them, but I just wanted to go over kind of what they do and where they can be useful, just so that you can narrow down which one you want to aim for and be collecting the champions to build. Though personally, I would recommend trying to hold on to as much as you can and try to make them all, because I think they're all very good champions in their own regards. But you've got your 2 dungeon champions of different colors. Their kits are a little different, but they kind of work the same way, trying to do really high single target damage. And then you've got Tia, your arena specialist, though I think she can also be useful in things like Void Tower and Bounty Hunts, just trying to freeze people, much like you would in Arena. But we've got some really good ones to start out the game with for the Hero Synthesis. I really like the system for it. Gives you a reason to collect other heroes, and it's a lot of fun. So best of luck collecting all the heroes. Have fun with the champion you pick, and I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. I'll see you next time. Bye.